classic example of the sacrifices that immigrants make, leaving their homeland, leaving family and friends to come to this country. And immigrants are expected to work hard and make a new life for themselves. And once we've accomplished that, there's a certain sense of pride that comes with being an immigrant and actually making it in this country and watching your children make it. This next storyteller I fondly refer to as the River Woman. She's the daughter of a forest ranger, and she comes from Guyana. Give it up for Miss Karen James Cody.
Good evening, good evening. One story, one?
Right.
I'm kind of old, you guys. I've been here a long time. I got a lot of stories, but they told me I could only tell one. So I think it's going to be something about no category. No category for me, no box for me. And it's okay. I am from the Caribbean country, small Caribbean country called Guyana. It was British Guyana when I was born there. And because of the British connection, it is the only English-speaking country on the continent of South America. And because of the British colonization, we're also more closely associated with the British West Indies, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, you know, all of our neighbors, our kinsmen. So we're a tiny, I refer to us as a tiny nation. Now we're not tiny in landmass, but we're tiny in population for sure. Less than 1 million people live in Guyana. And that is 1/6 of the size of the state of Maryland. Take that in. In the whole country, less than 1 million people. But it is an ecological wonderland. We have all these unique in the world species. And like most of we have 38,000 square miles, and most of it is virgin, pristine rainforest. And we would love for it to stay that way. One reason you might not have been there is because it is, you know, we're on the Atlantic Ocean as our eastern border, and so we're below sea level. So no white sand beaches, ergo, no tourist industry. And we're okay with that. We'd actually like our rainforest to remain really pristine. We have so much land that sometimes we give it away. There was this time back in 1978 when a group of Americans came down there, and we Guyanese learned that our government has leased a whole bunch of land to them to start a town deep in the forest. And they named it after their leader, Mr. Jones. And then they killed themselves in our little country. Shocking. For us Guyanese Americans, though, I do have one thing to say. Finally, everybody knew where our country was. Our mail stopped going to Ghana, West Africa, Ghana, Guyana. I know it's confusing. Anyway, the only reason I'm here, and I guess I'm supposed to stay in the light, right? You can tell I've done this a lot. The only reason I'm here is because in 1958, Guyana did not have a university. So our talented 10th went abroad. We went to England, we were still part of the Commonwealth at that time, or they went to Canada, which is still part of the 53-nation Commonwealth, or they came to the good old USA. And my dad chose Howard University. Now, in the 50s, black students from abroad and black students here had to go to the HBCUs, right? Historically black colleges and universities. Howard was a great one, but it didn't have everything. It didn't have agriculture and it didn't have veterinary, which happened to be the two things that my dad wanted to study. But he could have gone to Tuskegee and gotten those. However, that was in Alabama, so no. So he graduated in 1957 with a degree in mechanical engineering from Howard University. And in 1958, my mother and I came up to join him. So, unlike almost all the other Caribbean people, like Brawls people and almost everybody we know, we didn't go to Brooklyn. We went to Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, 1958. Tennessee was kind of rough too. It was the height of Jim Crow. I wouldn't have known much about that, being only 2.5. But what I do know is that I was coming from sunshine and light and noise and, relatives, like 14 on one side and 6 on the other, and I was that baby whose feet never touched the ground. And Nashville was cold and quiet, dark, cold, quiet, cold. But I think my mother had a good time there. I think my parents did. I think it was maybe the only time that they felt really embraced and included. Their circle were people from the HBCU community. Fisk is also down there. Tennessee State, which where my dad worked. And Meharry Medical College. I think I learned about Mensa for the first time before I was 6 years old. That's the Genius Society, for those who don't know. We were invited into Jack and Jill. My mother was the president of the Mother Goose Club. She was young and beautiful. She had come to America to marry her sweetheart, and I think she was really happy there. Now, Nashville was just the first of many destinations as we zigzagged our way across this country. In 1962, we went to Princeton for a university. We were only there a year. I don't remember that much. I was only 8. I do remember being called the N-word for the first time. Not in Tennessee, but in the pretty tree-lined streets of Princeton. So it's funny, it didn't make that strong of an impression, but I do remember it. But my dad snatched up his master's degree and we were out of there in a year. The next stop was 1965 when we went to Chicago, Northwestern University. Beautiful campus in a beautiful city. That's how it occurs today. In the early 60s, maybe not so much. Segregation in this country was still de facto, even in the North. My father didn't really have a good time there. He hated it, actually. I think he got his ulcer there. And I think he decided that he was not going to stay in America, that he was going to leave at the first opportunity, which he did. Like 10 years later, my parents were gone, went back to Guyana and haven't looked back. Now, I loved Evanston. I'm going to say we lived in married student housing, international student housing. So our neighbors were Japanese, they were from Ghana. I know that I could use chopsticks and that I had Bantu nuts before I was 10 years old. And there's something I want to say about the community of immigrants. We recognize each other, right? I won't call it a bond, but maybe a connection that people who are just not from here, we recognize each other, we acknowledge each other. So I had a blast in Evanston and Lake Michigan, back in the day when you could go out for the day and your mother didn't even wonder where you were. So all of this moving around meant that I had been to 10 schools before college. And there's a way of being that you acquire from all that change. You get real comfortable with being uncomfortable. You get real familiar with unfamiliar places, unfamiliar people, unfamiliar circumstances. And I would attest that, that grows into a strength. And we were real tight-knit inside the cocoon of the family. That's kind of how we rolled. We rolled together, and we spent a lot of time outdoors. So, my dad used to do fellowships in the summer, and every summer, and he would try to take us with him as often as he could. Those summers were kind of a crazy time. I remember camping in the woods all over America, the state parks all over America, running into a surprising number of foreigners out there. You know, we made friends from as far away as the Ukraine in America's national parks. I bet you didn't know that. There was a farmhouse in Ohio with no running water, but acres and acres and acres of cornfields and grasses that were taller than me that I could run around and hide from my sisters and that kind of thing. So I grew up with a real love of the outdoors. And I want to backtrack a little bit to my father because she mentioned that he was a forest ranger. That's how he earned his way to the United States. So for 4 years, he was out there in the rainforests of Guyana. He was minding the timber concessions out there. And he could go for days without seeing other people. And he describes these as the best times of his life, which tells you all you need to know about the man. But he did bequeath that love of the natural world to me. And I am a camper. I do know how to pitch a tent. I do know how to build a fire even if the wood is wet. And I can cook a gourmet meal on that campfire too. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah, river woman, that's who I am. I really love the natural world, and I love being out in it. Don't let the high heels and the lipstick fool you. Seriously, this is not me. But anyway, I guess I'll just end by saying, like my parents before me, and maybe even a little bit my children, I never have fully assimilated. You know, we went home as often as we could. We were taken, home as often as we could go there. My parents have been back there since 1979, and my identity is very much located there. But when I'm there, they know I'm from foreign. And when I'm here, people say things like, "Oh, before I knew you, I thought you were black." But I want to backtrack and tell you one funny story just to wrap up. A few years ago, quite a few years ago, back when I still had hope, I opened a profile on chemistry.com. And I very quickly learned that when a black American man says he loves the outdoors, that what he's talking about is a stroll down by the National Harbor at sunset. He does not mean, let's pitch our tent here. Like these rapids, it's going to really start in the morning. He doesn't mean, oh look, bears. Cool. Nothing like that, nothing like that. But that makes me distinctly different from most African Americans, and we have our tribe out there, outdoorafro.com. Anyway, that is my immigrant story. I thank you for your attention.